more children die of COVID in Taiwan, why doctors are puzzled about the cases. The Justice Ministry considers new hate crime laws following last week's shooting that targeted Taiwanese churchgoers in California. Washington is changing the type of weapons it's selling Taiwan, but not everyone is happy about it. Plus,
I'm Hameokon in Taipei at one of the world's biggest tech and computer trade shows, and I'm here to find out how supply chain issues and the pandemic are affecting an industry that has an impact on almost everyone across the globe.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. 2 more children under the age of 5 have died of COVID-19 in Taiwan, prompting questions about when the country will start vaccinating its youngest citizens. John Van Trieste has this report.
Taiwanese officials announced the deaths of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old from COVID-19, bringing the total now to 4 children who have died in the country from the virus. Experts are puzzled that 3 of these children also had encephalitis, swelling of the brain. It's a condition that a growing number of children with severe COVID have, but seemingly only in Taiwan.
目前观察到有这个脑炎、儿童脑炎比较增加的地方，也就只有香港跟我们，然后邻近的日本、韩国似乎没有看到类似的一个报告，所以是不是说跟我们这个华人的遗传或者是代谢等等这些有关的一些部分，或者您提到的环境因子，这种都是有可能。
Efforts to vaccinate children will get a boost on Wednesday, when Taiwan will start giving the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to children as young as 5. That's on top of the Moderna vaccine, which it's already giving to children as young as 6.
BNT 或者辉瑞的疫苗，那到5到11岁的我们是有77万剂嘛，那一定会够了。
But younger children, like those whose deaths were just announced, will still have to wait. Health Minister Chen Shizhong says that the Moderna vaccine has shown promise for small children in U.S. trials, and that Taiwan will ask Moderna to share its data if the U.S. gives its vaccine emergency approval for use with small children. But even then, the health minister says, it will still be at least July before Taiwan starts giving it to its own small children. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A former health official says a lengthy diagnosis process has cost lives in Taiwan's current wave of COVID-19. More than 500 people have died from COVID since the Omicron variant began to spread in Taiwan. Former Centers for Disease Control Director Su Yiren says a complicated process for confirming cases means doctors take too long to diagnose patients. He says by the time some patients are diagnosed, it's too late for medical treatment to save them. Slightly over half of the fatalities in the current wave died within 5 days of getting a diagnosis. 9% died before their COVID infection was confirmed. Su says a more efficient process would let patients get the medicine they need faster.
从他出现症状到确诊这个时间内，我们至少都要3到5天了我们错过那个给药的黄金时期，如果可以在1-2个小时里面完成。 那我觉得这个地方就可以解决这个问题。
Taiwan's Ministry of Justice says it's considering enacting hate crime legislation. It comes after the May 15th shooting in California targeting Taiwanese churchgoers. U.S. authorities say the suspect harbored resentment towards Taiwanese and has been linked to pro-China groups. Rick Glowett reports.
Taiwan's Vice President, William Lai, lights a candle in memory of John Cheng, a Taiwanese-American doctor who was shot dead in an attack on a Taiwanese church in California just over a week ago. A few days later, 68-year-old Taiwanese-American David Cho was charged with first-degree murder for allegedly opening fire on members of Irvine Taiwanese Presbyterian Church, killing Cheng and injuring 5 others. Authorities say they found handwritten notes by Zhou expressing hatred of Taiwan. And he has been linked to groups promoting a Chinese takeover of Taiwan. China's ruling Communist Party sees Taiwan as part of its territory and has ramped up threats to take the island by force. Taiwan has deep historical and cultural links to China, but how it defines the current relationship is at the root of many political and social divisions in the country. The California church shooting has rattled Taiwanese Americans at home and abroad. On Sunday, Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the US, Xiaobi Kim, worshipped with the Irvine Taiwanese Presbyterian Church. She said the attack ran counter to Taiwan's values.
I think our work has always been to build a democracy where people can express differences through peaceful ways. And again, we condemn any use of violence and hatred in expressing different views.
Following the shooting, activists and lawmakers in Taiwan have pushed for hate crime legislation, which the Justice Ministry on Monday said it would consider.
我们可以收集外国的立法例，然后再邀学者专家一起来讨论。如果认为在我们现行的法律不够周延，要纳入的话，那我们可以来想办法来立法。
The attack overseas has highlighted the potential for violence over Taiwanese people's differing views on China, prompting introspection and a commitment from the country's leaders to tackle hate. Patrick Chen and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
The Biden administration is changing the type of weapons it sells to Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry says arms purchased will be based on lessons learned from the war in Ukraine and says it is on board with the new strategy. But US business groups in Taiwan believe the new plan is too restrictive. Bing Wang reports.
US military hardware like these may no longer be available to Taiwan as Washington shifts its arms sales policy. The Biden administration will now only send Taiwan weapons it considers useful for asymmetric warfare, where countries with armies unequal in size are engaged in conflict. This new strategy is meant to compensate for the size of Taiwan's military. But in a letter addressed to U.S. State Department officials, American business groups in Taiwan say the new policy is too restrictive. The letter reads, "The apparent sole focus of this new arms sales policy is to address an all-out D-Day style invasion of Taiwan. Capabilities that do not apply to this scenario will be denied, including those that address China's ongoing coercive gray zone activities in Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, or a blockade scenario that would require a range of naval capabilities." China sees Taiwan as part of its territory, and its Air Force has been conducting frequent incursions into the country's ADIZ. Such gray zone tactics are part of an effort to wear out Taiwan's military. Taiwan's defense ministry backed the U.S. State Department's change in policy.
无法自制或者是需要快速提升战力的项目，才会采取对外采购的方式筹获。
Some military scholars believe that this shift in arms sales policy has much to do with watching the war in Ukraine unfold.
乌克兰的可以让我们借鉴的其实是逻辑，不是它的一些打法或武器。那在台海是海空战场，可是如何让它不要渡海？这是防空飞弹、反舰飞弹。 这个逻辑就跟乌克兰战场是一样，就是这种是比较低价的精准武器。
Another factor is Taiwan's financial capacity.
在这个情况下，那我们军方能够再多花到武器采购的这些经费上来讲，也的确相对来说是比较有限的啦。那在这个情况下，那军方其实必须要对现有的资源做更有效、跟更谨慎的运用，这也是事实。
U.S. and Taiwan defense officials will meet next month in the annual Monterey security talks, where they're expected to further discuss arms sales and defense strategies, hoping to work out a plan of action to deter any Chinese military threats against Taiwan. Chris Ma and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Leaders of the 4 Quad nations are vowing to stand together for a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Its members, the United States, Japan, India and Australia, are meeting in Tokyo for only the second in-person summit of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. The group has positioned itself as a counterweight to China's rising influence. Taiwan was not originally on the agenda, but it is expected to be discussed a day after Joe Biden said the US would defend Taiwan if it were attacked by China. Earlier, I spoke with Wang Hongren, a professor at National Tsinghua Gong University who specializes in security and East Asian relations. I began by asking him what impact the change in leadership in Australia would have on the Quad.
I think the new Australia Prime Minister Albany will continue to bolster the function of Quad, even in the face of a weak Indian role in the Quad. He announced that the Australia will open the defense school to train its Pacific Island neighbors due to this emerging China threat in the region. And the second, Australia new Foreign Minister Penny Huang, I think she is an absolute anti-China person who just described that actually China's recent strategy and recent security pact with Solomon Islands was the worst failure of Australia's foreign policy since the end of the World War II.
The Financial Times reported that Quad will tackle illegal fishing, that they will introduce a new satellite tracking system. Can you tell us how bad this issue is and where China fits into it?
This maritime initiative does not imply that it will target China vessels only. However, I think that those regional countries such as Japan, Australia, and India, they have been bothered or threatened by the fact that Chinese vessels have violated those countries' economic zones and undermined their regional economic interest. So I think the point here is this illegal fishing. This is a very immediate threat and the non-traditional security issues to the region.
If we can turn now to what Biden said on Monday, when asked if the US would intervene if China attacked Taiwan, he said yes. Can you tell us what was behind these comments?
I believe that the President Biden has prepared this reaction for a while and tried to find a good opportunity to show it. The reason for doing so is to send a clear message to the Chinese leaders in terms of a strategy, probably learn from the Russia-Ukraine war. The U.S. decides to deter China's any potential intention from unilaterally using military forces to change the status quo in the cross-strait.
Computex Taiwan is one of the world's largest computer and tech exhibitions, and it's coming back to Taipei after being held in cyberspace for the past 2 years. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen was among the dignitaries at the opening ceremony. She outlined the government's plans to keep Taiwan at the forefront of technology.
我们在今年即将成立数位发展部，打造数位国家、智慧岛屿，是执政团队最重要的目标之一。数位发展部的重要任务就是要加速推动国家数位发展政策，并且让台湾在数位发展方面的优势能够持续的领先世界。
The president also acknowledged Taiwan's status in the tech world and stressed how new technologies would play a pivotal role in the future. But as Jaime Ocon found out, the industry still faces massive challenges stemming from the pandemic.
The organizers at Computex say that turnout is much lower than before the pandemic. The last in-person event was held in 2019, but they say that despite this, the event is much more important than ever. Experts here say that the pandemic has pushed many people to turn digital. So the demand for computers, tablets, and more specifically, the parts that make up those devices have skyrocketed. But there's a major hitch: supply chain issues. Getting the parts you need to make a computer or electronic product has become a huge challenge over the past couple of years. One of the main reasons is the pandemic. Taiwan's economic minister Wang Meihua told the crowds here about the challenges affecting the industry on a national level.
我想，整个全球包括通膨的持续、俄乌的战争，还有中国的清零那对未来的这个消费性的产品确实有这样的下行的情形。那不过我们台湾的厂商包括我们今天的这个 Computex 针对相关的新的应用，持续的创新。 还有供应链的完整跟生态系的不断的进展，我想这个部分大家都面临挑战，但是台湾我们是谨慎有信心的。
Organizers here said that they're also trying to adapt to the challenges posed by travel restrictions. This year, a lot of the participants will be joining online. Along with building relationships, many of the people and the companies here said they are looking to recover from the loss of business caused by COVID-19. But they say the pandemic has also given them opportunity to develop technology. For instance, remote working has become a way of life. So many companies here are looking to the metaverse. Taiwan has a reputation as a tech powerhouse with a global reliance on its semiconductors, and is looking to build on that as it becomes a leader in a new tech space that will be just as integral in the future.
I'm Yin Khvat for TaiwanPlus, with a report on how 3 years after Taiwan's landmark same-sex marriage law, some LGBT couples are still fighting to become a family.
What makes this island nation exceptionally punch way above its might? It's the fascinating human stories we heard, plus the greatest movies we saw. The enduring and painstaking past we learned, plus the beautiful people we met. The delightful cuisines we tasted, plus the coexistence of many cultures we embraced. The powerful, energizing technology we invented, plus the ancient masterpieces we preserved. The human rights we advanced, plus the motherland we called home. TaiwanPlus. We will continue to show you unheard, compelling stories that touch our hearts. Come with us as we embark on yet another unraveling journey to the world.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. May 24th marks 3 years since Taiwan's landmark same-sex marriage law came into effect. In 2019, Taiwan became the first country in Asia to legalize marriage between people of the same gender. But as Yin Khvat reports, many LGBTQ families are still struggling.
Yushan and Jiaying have been together for 5 years and want to start a family.
因为我们很想要小孩，然后所以其实就很想要陪伴孩子长大，想知道养一个孩子的过程。
Since 2019, same-sex marriage has been legal in Taiwan, but the law does not include the right to joint adoption or artificial reproduction. So Yushan and Jiaying have avoided getting married so that Jiaying can adopt a child as a single person.
我觉得是最主要，为什么要改，就是为了孩子的权益。对，没错，就是如果孩子真的生病或什么的，但万一他只有我一个的保障，对，就会觉得这样就是有损孩子的权益。基本上，因为我们是2个一起的。
Yushan and Jiaying are just one of the hundreds of same-sex couples in Taiwan who have the right to legally marry, but still face hurdles that heterosexual couples do not. Taiwan has one of the largest and most visible LGBTQ communities in the region. It's often described as a beacon of liberalism or the best place to be gay in Asia. But the historic 2019 same-sex marriage law came amid a conservative backlash, and key rights, such as adoption, were not included. 3 years later, and those gaps have still not been filled. In a 2018 referendum, most voters chose a new, separate law for same-sex unions rather than changing Taiwan's definition of marriage as between a man and a woman. This was seen by the LGBTQ community as a blow, which pushed what they call true equality off the table. The law ultimately passed by the legislator left out more sensitive issues, such as the right to raise children. Recent polls suggest support for the LGBTQ community has grown since then. And earlier this month, lawmakers made the first step in proposing an amendment to the same-sex marriage law to allow joint adoption. But for now at least, LGBTQ Taiwanese looking to start a family are forced to work around an unequal system. Freddie Hung, an elementary school teacher in Taiwan's capital and a bisexual man, is in the process of using a surrogacy service abroad. It is an expensive and risky process.
所以我到现在还是只是受精卵的阶段，就是卡在那里，就没办法到下一个阶段，所以我觉得蛮悲惨的。
Taiwan's LGBTQ community fought for decades for the right to legally marry. And despite the pride and celebrations over the last 3 years, there's still a way to go until they can feel they've achieved true equality. Karma Xu, Piper Yu, and Rick Lowert for TaiwanPlus.
Ukraine's president has told world leaders that sanctions against Russia don't go far enough. President Volodymyr Zelensky was addressing corporate executives and government officials at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Speaking via video link from Kyiv, Zelensky said that sanctions should include an embargo of Russian oil, the blocking of all banks, and cutting off trade with Moscow. Several countries have already imposed some sanctions following Russia's invasion of Ukraine 3 months ago.
Якими мають бути санкції? Максимальними? Щоб Росія і кожен інший потенційний агресор, який хоче піти жорстокою війною проти сусіда, чітко знали, до чого це одразу призводить. І таких санкцій проти Росії, я вважаю, досі немає, а вони повинні бути.
Hong Kong's Cardinal Joseph Zen, pop star Denise Ho and 2 others have appeared in court to deny charges that they failed to register a charity that benefited protesters. Zen and Ho appeared before West Kowloon Court together with lawmaker Margaret Ng and scholar Hoi Bo-gun. They are among 6 trustees of the now defunct 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, charged with failing to register the charity with the government, which carries a fine of over $1,000. The group raised money to cover the legal and medical fees of pro-democracy activists, but was disbanded in 2021 after the imposition of the national security law. The trustees were arrested by national security police 2 weeks ago on suspicion of foreign collusion, but were released on bail. No charges under the national security law have yet been laid. Michelle Bachelet, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, has embarked on a long-awaited trip to China. Over 6 days, she is due to visit 2 locations in Xinjiang where abuses against the Uyghurs and other ethnic groups have been condemned as genocide by the US and other countries. Beijing has cited COVID-19 concerns to restrict the visitors to a bubble or closed loop. Our reporter Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick spoke to World Uyghur Congress spokesperson Zumrute Arkin to learn more.
What are your expectations for this trip? And what kind of meaningful access do you think her and her team will actually get there?
This tour is pretty much going to be choreographed and curated by the Chinese government. So the office and the High Commissioner herself will not be able to speak to people that she wants to speak to, freely go visit, specific locations, for example, camps, forced labor factories, and maybe also the sites of destroyed mosques or some other sites of cultural and religious importance. This visit was announced very unexpectedly, and the terms of the visit has not been made public. The lack of transparency is highly worrying for us, for not only Uyghur groups, but also for civil society groups in general, given that they have also not published a report since the announcement back in September 2021. We don't know how this visit will really be used and if it's going to any use of all, but we for sure know that the Chinese government will use this for their propaganda show and also instrumentalize this visit as well.
The UN report on human rights abuses in the region has apparently been ready for some time, for months apparently, but they've not released it yet. So why do you think that is?
This is a good question. This is something that we have been asking for months. 8 months later, we still have not seen this report made public, although it was announced by the office that it was finalized and it was to be made public very soon. We do have concerns because we think that the delay was probably due to the pressure from the Chinese government. Perhaps there were, negotiations or pressure to hold off the report until after the Beijing Olympics. And maybe also the delay of the report might have been reason for which the office of the High Commissioner was also granted access to the region. Perhaps, all these reasons are valid. And if they do end up being true, then it's highly worrying that the High Commissioner, as an independent person who's supposed to fulfill her mandate in an independent manner, is succumbing to Chinese pressure and not fulfilling her mandate to really assess and monitor human rights violations around the world.
Researchers in Argentina have discovered a new species of pterosaur, a huge flying reptile that lived alongside dinosaurs 86 million years ago. The fossil was found in the Andes mountain, about 1,000 kilometers from Buenos Aires. It measures around 9 meters in length. That's as long as a yellow school bus, making it one of the largest pterosaurs in the world. The researchers say they named their discovery the Dragon of Death because it was essentially a massive flying predator. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally, today we leave you with images of Europe's tallest active volcano, Mount Etna, spewing lava and ash high over the Mediterranean island of Sicily, Italy. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.